Finally, this lunchtime, we're remembering the great journalist and broadcaster John Stapleton, who's died at the age of 79. John's career began in newspapers, but he soon became a regular face on television for both the BBC and here at ITV, including on TVAM, Daybreak and Good Morning Britain. He reported from all over the world, but could also deal with even the trickiest of guests on the sofa.
I was saying what a nice creature you were. Now don't let me down. Don't let me down. Mr. Parkinson sent his regards, by the way.
Last year, John revealed he'd been diagnosed with Parkinson's. Today, his agent said he died in hospital after the disease was complicated by pneumonia. John spoke openly to ITV News last October about the diagnosis.
Talking is what I do. I've earned my living talking for 50 years, so it's very frustrating not to be able to communicate properly or inadequately. If me speaking out helps other people because of one or two people may know me, that's all to the good as far as I'm concerned. I've no hesitation about doing so, and if I can help others cope with what is, let's face it, a distressing illness, a distressing disease, then all to the good.
Broadcaster John Stapleton, who died peacefully this morning. All of us here at ITV News are sending our thoughts and condolences to his family and his loved ones.
On Newsline tonight, one of the world's most influential and powerful politicians.
The veteran broadcaster and original Sky News presenter John Stapleton dies at the age of 79. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. Now, tributes have been paid to the veteran broadcaster John Stapleton, who has died at the age of 79.
On Newsline tonight, one of the world's most influential and powerful politicians.
One of the launch presenters of Sky News, no less, John Stapleton had Parkinson's disease complicated by pneumonia. He died peacefully in hospital this morning. His career also saw him present the BBC Watchdog programme and GMTV's News Hour. Well, joining us now is Sky's very own Mark Austin, a man I know who had the pleasure of working with John. So did I, actually, for many years. He was a great man, and he really was one of the TV news world's greats, wasn't he, Mark?
Well, he really was. He was a really good journalist. He was a really good broadcaster, and he was a really good man. And he had this very rare combination, I think, Emma, and you knew him as well. And I think that combination was of the hard-edged journalist, the reporter in the truest sense. And he also had that ability to really connect with the viewer. He had that warmth. He had that ability to really make a connection with the people watching. And that is pretty rare, to do that hard-edged. He was a foreign correspondent. He was a reporter in the truest sense, and he had that warmth. And that was, I think, a really rare combination in a broadcast journalist. And he had it in spades.
He did, didn't he? I remember distinctly, my memory is of getting in very early for these breakfast shows, and he was always there with the Yorkshire Post. It was a proper newspaper man, and whatever happened in the day, he'd be reading the papers first before anything else that he did, because that was his backrock. And as he said, he was a proper journo, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But was able to translate it so the rest of us who didn't have that kind of intellect could understand what was going on.
Well, you know what? I first met him in 1982 at the BBC, and I had joined as a 23, 24-year-old reporter, and he was already in his early mid-30s, and he was working for Newsnight. He was working for Panorama. He was going to Argentina. The Falklands was in 1982. He was doing all those things. He was in the Middle East. He was going to Central America. And I thought, that is what I want to do. And when he came back from one trip, we had a conversation. And I said to him, you've got the best job at the BBC. And he said, well, do you know what? I didn't go to university. I learned everything on newspapers. And I said, well, that's exactly the same as me. And I didn't go to university. I went to grammar school like him. I joined the local newspaper. And I just found that we had a real connection. given that at the BBC, most people around us had got degrees and from very good universities. So, but he was really helpful. He was really warm. And in those early days, he was so kind to me and took such an interest in my career. And we both left the BBC, went to ITV, and we did. But he was always there with little comments, sending the odd text. And he was just a really, really good man.
We've seen some pictures while you're talking. I think he had a nice glass of wine once in a while. He enjoyed a good lunch, if I remember rightly. But also a great picture with him with his wife, Lynn Foldswood, who was also a phenomenal TV presenter in her own right. They made a great double act, didn't they? And they had a great force because she was a campaigner in her own right, wasn't she? And for a decade, they kind of owned TV, didn't they? They kind of worked together, and they were the face of factual programming for a long time.
Yeah, and he was so proud of her, and he was proud of what they did together. And this was the other side of John Stapleton. Again, Watchdog, a consumer program, really did connect with the viewers. So he did that. He did breakfast television when breakfast television was beginning, and yet he still had this real drive to get out there, to go and do the story. I can remember 2003, the Iraq War. He was there and he interviewed the big politicians when he came back. And he got the Royal Television Society News Presenter of the Year, I think it was in 2004. And that was all about Iraq and what he was doing in Iraq. But, and that was what he wanted to do. He loved just being where the story was. And I saw him at Katrina. I saw him at the tsunami, that awful tsunami. And the other thing, just before, I know you're struggling for time, but he used to say to me, whenever we bumped into each other, we weren't great friends, but I always used to see it. And he used to say to me, how's it going? And I say, oh, it's going all right. I'm enjoying life. He used to say, beats working, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that was his real enthusiasm for the job,
even with those 3 a.m. alarm calls and working all godly hours, I know. And I suppose in a cruel irony, he took his battle with his disease, Parkinson's, very honourably, didn't he? He fought a good fight. And saying to you, actually, that the irony is that it took his voice, sadly, at the end. Yes,
well, I met him once since his diagnosis, saw him once, and we talked about it, and he said to me, it's typical, he said, talking is the only thing I can do well. And, and he was such a good talker, such a good broadcaster, that it was very cruel. But he will be remembered as a very rare beast in television, that, those two qualities that so few broadcasters have.
Indeed. R.I.P. John Stapleton. Great to talk to you, Mark. Thank you very much. Mark Austin, who is back on your TV tomorrow, I believe. But for now, thank you very much for talking to us here on Sky.
Hello, good morning, and welcome once again to Watchdog, where today we...
And tributes to John Stapleton, the veteran journalist and broadcaster who has died suddenly at the age of 79 from Parkinson's. The veteran broadcaster and journalist John Stapleton has died suddenly from Parkinson's disease at the age of 79. In a career that spanned more than 40 years, he presented on the BBC's Nationwide, Panorama, Watchdog. He was on Sky News and on ITV's GMTV and Good Morning Britain. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's a year ago. Ellie Price looks back at his life.
Good evening. Tonight, Nationwide on the Road hits what, weather-wise at least, is the Wild West.
John Stapleton became a household name in the mid-70s on the BBC's Nationwide programme. First as a reporter, then a main presenter.
Alice, I always thought that clog dancing was just something that uncouth northerners like myself did. What are long-haired trendies like you doing clog dancing? Imagine someone knocking on your door in the middle of the night.
A versatile journalist at home and abroad on the serious and less serious stories.
I mean, how nasty are you?
About this nasty.
He also worked on Panorama, Newsnight and ITV's Good Morning Britain.
We gave thousands of you quite a shock when we revealed the potential dangers of badly wired plugs.
And of course, the consumer show Watchdog, which he presented with his wife, Lynn Foldswood. But he was arguably best known as a breakfast presenter.
And this is the BBC's Breakfast Time programme.
First on the BBC,
Opening of Parliament and your plans for the country, Nick.
and then on ITV, where he stayed for more than 2 decades, appearing on our screens on and off until a year ago, when he announced his Parkinson's diagnosis. Never one to shy away from the awkward subjects, he spoke openly about his concerns about the condition and what the future might hold.
And it's very frustrating sometimes, particularly if people are constantly saying to you, sorry, what did you say? And you have to repeat yourself time and time again. I'm fairly pragmatic about the prospect of this getting worse. I try to remain positive because what's the point of not being?
John Stapleton's Daybreak colleague Kate Garraway has led the tributes to her dear friend and journalistic hero, while Good Morning Britain's Susanna Reid said he was a legend in broadcasting and a huge part of television history.
The wonderful broadcaster John Stapleton, who was a legend, a lovely man and also a great friend.
Of betrayal.
From hard-hitting interviews to breakfast television warmth, we remember a true broadcasting legend.
Hello, good morning. I'm John Stapleton, bringing you a special edition of GMTV Today, coming to you live from Kuwait and from London.
Fearless on screen and a true gentleman off camera. We'll be sharing our memories of our friend and colleague John Stapleton, who's died aged 79.
Here's Sean with the rest of the day's news.
And we're going to be talking more about our friend and colleague John Stapleton. Journalists and broadcasters have paid tribute to veteran TV presenter John Stapleton, who died yesterday, aged 79. He had been admitted to hospital following complications with pneumonia, according to his agent, and his son and daughter-in-law had been constantly by his side. Liz Summers looks back on his career spanning more than half a century.
Hello, good morning.
He was a broadcasting giant, a warm and familiar face on our screens for more than 5 decades. John Stapleton began his career in newspapers before going on to present shows including the BBC's Panorama, Newsnight and Watchdog with his wife Lynn Foldswood. He also commanded respect on ITV's The Time, The Place, The News Hour and Good Morning Britain. In 2004, he was named the Royal Television Society's Presenter of the Year for his work on the Iraq War. The veteran broadcaster revealed his Parkinson's diagnosis last October.
The response of the public since this was announced on Monday has been absolutely overwhelming. I've spent the last 2 days doing nothing but answering calls and messages, lovely messages from people. Very flattering too, some of them, you know, to the point where I thought they've got the wrong guy, they're mixing up with someone else.
Posting on Instagram, John's son Nick said Dad had got very, very unwell. He wasn't happy living his life as it was with Parkinson's. That's the truth. It turns out he got what he wanted, to leave us on his terms without suffering. In a tribute on X, Manchester City said John was a passionate City supporter and a regular at the Etihad Stadium. He will be missed.
I'm Penny Smith and I've got a new partner.
Those who worked with John describe him as a brilliant broadcaster and a lovely human being.
He was professional, he was clever, he was a brilliant interviewer, he was everything you could possibly want in a co-host. For me, the Stapes that I will hold in my heart is the fun Stapes.
John's son said he was just a very loving, unbelievably generous man. You won't meet anyone with a bad word to say about him, and you can't do much better than that. Liz Summers, Good Morning Britain.
And he was a really good friend of all of us here at Good Morning Britain and a very big football fan, I can confirm. John Stapleton's friend and another former colleague, Lorraine, will join us at 7:45 to remember their time working together.
Right, let's talk to someone who was always impeccably sourced. Our wonderful friend to this programme, John Stapleton. Part of Good Morning Britain history, part of breakfast television history, a legend of broadcasting. Inspired you, didn't he, Richard?
Completely. He was 10 years older than me, and I was at school when he got his first big network break on Nationwide with Sue Lawley. Yeah. And I remember watching him. I was about 14, 15. I knew then, like him, I wanted to be a newspaper reporter. And I used to watch him on Nationwide and think, one day I want to do that. I want to do what you're doing. Because he did it so well.
Yeah, he was.
And he was fresh. I don't think there's anybody quite like him, actually, back in the 1970s. He broke a mould. He broke a mould in terms of TV reporting. He was authoritative, but he was relaxed and had a kind of an informality about him, which never got in the way of how to tell a story. I think that was the newspaper man in him.
Yeah, it was, because he was a big newspaper man. He used to, when I'd chat to him, he'd always talk about what he'd read in the Manchester Evening News, which he saw because he was from the Northwest. But he was a genuine bloke. He was just a lovely, lovely bloke who had time for everybody. There wasn't a side. He didn't have a giant ego that got in the way. And he was the northerner living in the south. He remained a northerner, as it were, all his life. I'm talking to Glenn in sound. A mum used to send him from Bury black puddings.
He was such a charming man. He was a proper gentleman.
Yes, he was.
John Stapleton, old-fashioned gentleman.
Yes.
He was on our programme last year. We were lucky enough to talk to him because he just revealed that he was suffering with Parkinson's. But when I say suffering, he bore it with such positivity and good grace. And we asked him about the diagnosis and how he'd reacted.
I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible and think on the bright side, you know, make the best of it and lead as normal a life as possible. As long as I can still watch Man City, that's all I care about.
He was absolutely passionate Man City fan.
He asked me if I wanted to go and see a Manchester City match with him. I managed to decline.
Oh,
hindsight.
yeah, but now, don't you think?
I know,
you wish you'd gone?
Yes, I do.
Well, he would go with his son Nick. So, you know, there was that father-son bond, and he bought season tickets for home and away, so he could go to every game. And he was a Man City fan through thin and thinner. And then all of a sudden, great success comes, and the league titles, the Premier League, European glory. He could never have expected that. And they were Man City was his second love after his family. But I did think, when his wife Lynn died, you saw a little light, the light dimmed, and he seemed to be a bit.
Died during the pandemic.
Yeah, they were a hugely successful pair, weren't they?
Really
the original
Watchdog.
They were the original married couple on telly.
Married couple.
Completely, yeah.
That's right.
And they made a difference. I mean, their campaigns on Watchdog were phenomenal. I mean, they were responsible sometimes for literally millions of pounds being repaid to people who've been ripped off.
So in the Times obituary, it mentions prominent among their campaigns, both Lynn Foldswood and John Stapleton. He uncovered the fuel tax scandal in which travel companies had been slapping a hefty surcharge on package holidays at a time when the price of fuel was going down. They were forced to refund £19 million, and John said it was one of his proudest moments in consumer journalism. Huge impact. Another expose, the free return flights to New York offered by Hoover to customers who'd spent more than £100 on one of its products. Take-up exceeded expectations, and the company had reneged on that deal. But Watchdog broke the story, and Hoover was forced to provide the flights at the cost of £40 million. And there's very few journalists who have that kind of impact, but John Stapleton did.
Well, he's a kind of the early Martin Lewis of consumer journalism. I remember both those stories now. I'd forgotten them. I didn't know John was responsible in breaking them and getting those scandals
every director
corrected.
Hoover lost their job. And quite right too.
So many people getting in touch. My condolences to all who knew. John says Leslie reunited with his beloved wife Lynn. DCT, I always enjoyed John's respectful and knowledgeable presenting style. I once encountered him at a City match and he was a thoroughly nice chap. Dr. Roberts says a true journalist who I grew up with via TVAM and GMTV, fearless yet balanced, warm yet incisive, an ethical broadcaster to the end. What a legacy.
And we just saw a glimpse in that section of the interview that we ran here last October of his philosophical attitude to life and death. I bumped into him a few weeks after we did that interview in the corridor. I think he'd come in to talk to Lorraine, actually. And we got chatting outside, and I said, well, how are you? How are you? And I never forgot what he said, and he said it to other people as well. I read the quote yesterday. He said, look, he said, I've had a fantastic life. He said, I've had a wonderful life. He said, I can't complain. And what a wonderful overarching grip on the realities of life and death.
And the glass was always half full, never half empty. And he was a genuine. But I think being such a genuine, lovely bloke is what made him a great broadcaster. Rather than being a great broadcaster, made him a lovely, genuine bloke. It was
so true.
It was him.
He was authentic.
Well, he worked quite closely with Lorraine, and she'll be coming in later this morning to remember him from her perspective.
Thank you both very much indeed. We'll talk to you at 9:15.
It's just gone 7:25. Well, I have to say that the lights dimmed for many of us yesterday morning when we got the news that John Stapleton, our good friend and colleague, had very quietly slipped away.
Indeed, yeah, very sad news as we've been reporting this morning as John's death, as you say, Richard, was announced yesterday. Reflected in many of the papers today, John has been referred to as the ultimate gentleman, a fantastic journalist. John started his career in local newspapers before moving to broadcast in the 70s, travelling the world for TVAM, GMTV, Daybreak, as well as for Panorama and Newsnight. I remember him hugely fondly. Obviously, I'd been in his orbit for the best part of about 30 years since I started in the business. My first ever boss, when I left the Fringe Theatre to go into PR, knew John of old from Fleet Street, you know, St Bride's Church, you know, the old stomping ground for all the old journalists back then. And so John sort of took me under his wing because we had that mutual connection. And of course, I found myself in a daily orbit almost when I started out on breakfast television back in 1997. And you always wanted to be with John whenever you were out and about having a bit of a do at an awards do. I'd always sort of be with John because his stories were absolutely phenomenal, and you'd sort of look up in awe at this man who'd obviously seen it all. You learned so much at his knee. In fact, one particular do was so ribald that I remember losing my jacket. Such was the event. But on a personal note, what I loved about John is whatever you brought to the table, and obviously showbiz wouldn't necessarily be his patch, that was my patch. He always respected what you brought to the table. And whenever we'd have a debrief afterwards, he always had the backs for every member of the team, regardless of who they were. And as we know in television, it can be a fraught arc, light and shade, a lot of changes can happen, but he always had the backs of the people, left, right, centre, below stairs, front of stage, anywhere, you know,
and he always
in the
had
company
the
of
backs of the
players.
viewer and the
Yes.
consumer.
Oh my goodness me!
Of his work
when you
on
flagged
Watchdog,
those, those campaigns you mentioned earlier in the last hour,
alongside his wife, Lynn Foldswood.
Oh, and Lynn, he would always let me take Lynn for a turn around the dance floor. She used to tear up that floor to Dancing Queen with me whenever we had the opportunity. And, you know, when you see the picture of the two of them together, you know, utterly devoted to each other and reunited now on a damp cloud. My thoughts, of course, and all of our thoughts here, go to John's son, Nick, and his family and friends. John, a colleague and friend, sorely missed, but never forgotten. Lorraine will be joining us later, actually, to share her memories and pay tribute to the legend that's John Stapleton as well. That's coming up now.
It's 7:54, and we return now to the news that our much-loved friend and colleague John Stapleton died yesterday morning at the age of 79.
A true broadcasting legend with a career spanning more than half a century, he played a vital role in the launch of this programme. And joining us now, Lorraine Kelly, and he was there on the very first day.
Very first day.
You were at TVAM.
I was a baby. It was 1984, and I came down to that London just to meet everybody and see how the whole thing worked. And I was so nervous, and I couldn't even speak to anyone. John and his wife Lynn, who a legend also, were so kind to me.
Lynn Foldswood.
Yeah, Lynn Foldswood.
The original husband and wife presenting team.
Proper journalists.
Trailblazers.
Amazing. Real trailblazers. And helped so many people. And John continued to help people, you know, talking. He was just remarkable, but they were so good to me.
Let's have a look back.
Before we get more stories, we'll have a little look back.
Please.
At a wonderful career.
Hello, good morning. I'm John Stapleton, bringing you a special edition of GMTV Today.
A broadcasting legend who was unafraid to hold politicians to account, but always showed warmth and compassion.
On a personal note, you've had a rough ride last few months, and you conceded that yourself.
You've noticed that.
John Stapleton was at the heart of every story as he reported from all over the world.
I'm sorry, Nick, we're having to go now because we're all being told to evacuate this hotel.
Described by colleagues in front of and behind the camera as honourable and a giant, he was always professional, but shared his softer side too.
I was saying what a nice creature you were. Now, don't let me down. Don't let me down. Mr. Parkinson sent his regards, by the way.
John and Lynn Foldswood became the iconic husband and wife presenting duo, fighting for the rights of consumers on Watchdog. He was also a much-loved member of the ITV daytime family, first on TVAM, then GMTV and Daybreak.
From today, television cameras will be allowed to film criminal trials at one of the highest courts in the land.
As well as here on Good Morning Britain.
Hello, good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Also on the show, we've been asking at what age would you leave your child on their own at home?
Even when he himself became the story, revealing his Parkinson's diagnosis, he continued to remain humble and leaves behind a legacy of kindness and a lesson to stay positive.
I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible and think on the bright side, you know, make the best of it and lead as normal a life as possible. As long as I can still watch Man City, that's all I care about.
He was curiously ageless, wasn't he? Looking at those clips, he barely aged over those 40 years.
It was really annoying. We all used to say that. We used to say he looks exactly the same as ever he did. What an amazing man. What a gentleman. What a gentleman. But what I loved about him was that he would stick up for people, you know, he really would. Like, you know, when you have these meetings where everybody's there, or if somebody had a problem, they would, and they were too intimidated perhaps to go to management with it, he would go and speak on their behalf. And in these meetings, he was always one, I used to say, you're always one that goes, but, because he would put his hand up and go, but, and then he'd be right in there, and, you know, any sort of injustices, anything at all, you know, that wasn't just on his programmes, it was actually in life as well. He would always had your back.
He was fearless.
Utterly
I mean, he
fearless.
spent years alongside Lynn Foldswood, campaigning, crusading consumer journalists, and in some cases that would result in action taken against companies.
Absolutely.
And also fraudsters. I mean, there were people were put in prison as a result of their journalism. And at one point I was reading, the police had advised that they should wear stab vests.
Yeah, I remember.
And he just took it in his stride. He just went, you know what, it's the price you pay sometimes for being an investigative journalist.
Yeah, and a proper journalist, a real proper journalist. That's the thing, and I don't think you'll see his like again. He's quite remarkable. Even today, lovely Glenn was putting my microphone on, and everybody obviously has got all their anecdotes and remembering him and everything, and she said, there was never anybody that said, oh, I didn't really know him. You know, if you worked with someone, he said, oh, because he had time for everybody and he spoke to everybody, and it was like, so everyone has their own memories of John. He wasn't somebody who would come in and not talk to everyone, you know, from... It didn't matter what job you were doing, he would be talking to you.
He started in the dying days, but they were still there, of the great days of Fleet Street.
Yes.
He started on the old Daily Sketch, of course, now defunct. He was a proper Fleet Street reporter, hanging around St Bride's Church.
But that shone right through, didn't it?
Exactly.
And it was always that thing of, he was never the story. Like, I mean, I know towards the end with the Parkinson's, and he was so brave to come on and talk about it, but not once was there an ounce of self-pity.
No.
Totally. It was all about, right, OK, let's find out about this illness. What can we do about this? How can we help other people?
Well, he came in after he'd done this programme to talk about it last October. A few weeks later, he came in to talk to you. And I remember, I was saying earlier, I bumped into him in the corridor afterwards, and we were talking, and we were talking about how it was with him. And I do remember him being incredibly philosophical and saying to me, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, Richard, he said, I've had a great life. He said, I can't complain.
I know,
he said,
and isn't that
I'm
wonderful?
in my late 70s. I've had a fabulous time.
Isn't that wonderful? And he was funny as well. I mean, you know, we talked about, obviously, his career. Really, really funny sense of humour, very dry sense of humour, and a huge football fan. Obsessed, to the point of obsession, I think, with that.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Let's just have a little listen to what he told you, because it's very important, his words about his condition.
There are loads of people, not just people with Parkinson's, but loads of families all over the country facing the same kind of dilemma and need to talk about these things. That's really, well, it wasn't just about getting John Stapleton back on the telly. Lovely as it is to be here, darling.
Lovely as it is for us.
It's like it's the combination of the heavyweight message and the consideration for anyone else in his condition.
Exactly.
But with his wit.
I know.
It was a combination of wit and wisdom.
So funny. And also, it's great that his son Nick has picked up the torch. You know, he's doing amazing things. He's doing brilliant consumer shows. And it's important. I think it's more important than ever that we have that sort of journalist, that he, you know, that his values and his philosophy and all of what made John, you know, he's passed that on to everyone. And he's a great mentor. You know, he taught people a lot, taught me an awful lot.
It's good to hear as well that he had a peaceful passing.
Yes,
which is
with the
very
people
good to
that he
hear.
loved
He was a completely nerveless broadcaster, wasn't he? I never saw him.
You could
look
throw
remotely
anything at him, Richard.
nervous.
Anything you could throw at him at all. And he always had the newspapers with him when he was doing a live, just in case things went awry. And then he would just pick them up. And you never knew whether the whole thing was crashing round about his ears, because you as a viewer would never know, because he was utterly calm.
Yeah.
And brilliant and
Well,
sadly
genuinely
missed.
will. It's a phrase often used, but it's true. He will not see his life again.
You won't. You absolutely won't. No.
And our love to his family.
God bless you,
friends.
John.
Thank
Very
you,
much
Lorraine.
so.
Thanks for coming
Thank
in, Lorraine.
you.
Have a good show later.
Thank you.
All right. It's.
First though, Dr Hilary is here, as we said. This morning we are remembering our friend and colleague John Stapleton, who died at the age of 79 yesterday. Now, I was on that sofa many times with John over the years, from GMTV to more recently, when he came in to talk about living with Parkinson's without an ounce of self-pity and that dry sense of humour that we absolutely loved. Very sad, not unexpected, but still very sad, Hilary.
Very, very sad. I mean, the word legend is overused these days, but he was a genuine broadcasting legend.
Yeah.
He was so knowledgeable. He could take a piece of breaking news just given to him on the spot and talk about it from his depth of knowledge, ad lib for half an hour if needed. Obviously, half an hour was never needed, but he was so knowledgeable, and more to the point, he was everybody's friend.
Yeah.
People looked up to him, they trusted him, they admired him, and he was an inspiration to so many, including both of us.
Oh, absolutely. I was saying earlier on GMB that my very first day at TVAM, when I'd just been taken on as the Scottish correspondent, and I had to come down to London, and the first two people I met were John and his wife Lynn Foldswood. And Hilary, they were just so kind to me. You know, they were like, even to the point of, right, OK, so this introduced me to everybody. Here's the canteen. Here are the toilets. Here's where, you know, and just made me feel really at home.
Yeah, he spoke to everybody on the same level, and he remembered people from years after meeting them or giving them their first job. He would remember them and speak to them. You know, he went from the BBC. Well, first of all, he was on publications up north, wasn't he? Lancashire and Oldham Chronicle.
Yeah.
And then he gravitated to the BBC. Then he came to TVAM. Then it was Watchdog back on BBC. He did Look North. He did Nationwide. He did Watchdog. He did everything. He was so experienced, and won the Presenter of the Year with the Royal Television Society, covering the Iraq War, Kosovo War, so many things.
There is on Watchdog with Lynn, and I mean, they did some amazing pioneer work. They really did.
They really did.
Helped so many people. The time, the place, again, pioneering. There wasn't another TV show like that.
That's right, that's right.
And that, again, was something that he was so good at, to take a really complex issue and give everyone in the audience, you know, as many people as he could, their chance to put their point of view.
Absolutely.
Very good.
And some of their campaigning, him and Lynn, would be on health. So the HIV meningitis campaign, but they campaigned against fraud, against too much red tape, against fuel.
They were a formidable duo.
They were a formidable duo.
They were. But also, as you said, really approachable. And everyone here, we've all obviously been sharing memories and talking about John. And you know that in television there are people who, particularly who sit on this side of the camera, who are not friendly and who don't know the names of their crew and who aren't good. He knew everybody.
He did. He was
everybody.
And he's
and he
beloved.
had time for everybody.
Absolutely.
And you know what? Even when he came on, when he had Parkinson's, like I said, there was no self-pity there. There was more about, he approached it very journalistically, wanted to find out more, and then, of course, the campaigning side came out.
Absolutely.
And he wanted to make sure that people were more aware.
Yes.
Let's fundraise, let's get to the bottom of this disease, let's sort it out.
So he was diagnosed in April last year, and he came public with it in October and said, I want people to be aware of this disease. He was a patron of the society, the Parkinson's Society, because his mother had it for years before he did. And he just wanted people to be aware of it. So his campaigning continued to the end.
Absolutely.
And we'll be reflecting that in what we do a bit later on in the programme.
We certainly will. We certainly will. You'll be coming back, Hilary, and very, very sadly missed. Feels very odd to talk about John in the past tense. Absolutely. And lots of love to his son Nick, who's you know, taking the torch.
Yes,
he's a brilliant journalist as well, you know, and a campaigner. So, you know, that Stapleton, the gene.
The gene. He's got the gene.
There he is there. Fantastic. Wonderful, wonderful man. Right, it's coming up.
Now, tributes have been paid to the broadcaster John Stapleton, who's died at the age of 79.
He presented a number of BBC and ITV news programmes, most famously Watchdog, with his wife Lynn Foldswood.
Well, following his diagnosis with Parkinson's last year, John made it his mission to raise further awareness of the disease.
Hello, good morning, and welcome once again to Watchdog, where today we investigate a problem which, unfortunately, is all too common.
Speaking is how I've earned my living for the best part of 50 years. And it's very frustrating sometimes, particularly when people are constantly saying to you, sorry, what did you say? And you have to repeat yourself time and time again.
Alice, I always thought that clog dancing was just something that uncouth northerners like myself did. What are long-haired trendies like you doing clog dancing? Imagine someone knocking on your door in the middle of the night.
I'm fairly pragmatic about the prospect of this getting worse. I try to remain positive because what's the point of not being?
I mean, how nasty are you?
About this nasty.
Yeah. It's not easy. I'm not trying to suggest it's easy for anyone. No. You know, don't suffer in silence, for God's sake. Don't suffer in silence. You know, help is available. I'm very lucky in many regards. But you know, keep the pecker up. That's the answer.
John Stapleton. We're joined now by Caroline Russell from Parkinson's UK, as well as broadcaster Nick Owen, who obviously knew John really well. Nick, if we could just come to you, first of all, such a sad day, but we've heard John, in his own words, talk so bravely about his own experiences, didn't we? He was reporting right to the end.
Yeah, typical of him to be positive, keep your pecker up and all that, typical. He was a fantastic broadcaster, a great friend, and it's such a shock. I know he had these terrible problems with Parkinson's, and obviously life was difficult, but somehow hearing that he had died was a terribly devastating shock yesterday, and I can't quite get my head around it at the moment because we have such happy memories together.
And recent memories as well, Nick. I mean, I understand you were only in touch with him a few weeks ago.
Yeah, actually, we were talking and reminiscing about things, including an interview we did with Eric Morecambe shortly before Eric died, and what a great day we had, and how funny Eric Morecambe was. You know, remember at one stage we said to Eric, "It's great having you here. Can you stay a bit longer?" He said, "Stay? I could marry you." That was sort of typical bouncing banter we had with him all morning. And then, more importantly almost, John and I had breakfast with him in the TVAM canteen for about an hour. And he was entertaining us and entertaining everyone else in the room. Just terrific memories. So yeah, we were talking only a month or so ago about that very thing and reminiscing. I just can't believe all of a sudden he's gone.
I'm delighted to say we're also joined now by broadcaster Nikki Campbell. And Nikki, of course, you knew John really, really well. And when we look back at those images of him, the many years, the decades of broadcasting, of reporting, he's a man who made a difference, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. We worked on a crazy late night show called Central Weekend Live in the mid to the late 90s. And John was a proper journalist. He came through that kind of, inky-fingered newspaper tradition when newspapers were king. That's where he learned his trade. And that came through in his judgment and his journalism and his questions. And the words nice and best don't often go together. But he was one of the nicest, and he was one of the very best. And he's such a great sense of humour. I remember we'd be standing backstage, and just before we went on for these pretty heavy-duty debates, he'd always whisper in my ear and say something hilariously funny, and it was really, dry wit. But as a journalist, he was gentle, and he was kind with people, but he was so insightful. He was that classic, steel hand in a velvet glove. He could be so professionally sharp, but such an immensely decent man.
Nikki, we've just been seeing some pictures on screen of John's partnerships with lots of co-presenters over the years, but of course, famously, it was working with his wife, the late Lynn Foldswood, particularly on Watchdog, that we'll remember most of all. And their partnership was so special, wasn't it? Both on camera and off camera.
Yeah, that comes back to what I was saying about authenticity. because when I took over Watchdog, after it was John and Lynn, then it was Anne Robinson, who had incredible merits, but we tended to, pardon the headphones, I'm on the radio at 9, we tended to look back really to John and Lynn, because boy did they care, boy did they care about people, boy did they care about righting wrongs and getting a good deal for. That's not to say Anne didn't, but John and Lynn was something special.
And Nick, if I could just come back to you, I would like to pick up on something that Nikki just said, which is that nice and best don't always go together. And I think John Stapleton was one of those people that how good he was shone off the screen. You could tell, couldn't you?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, he had all the ingredients you need to be a good presenter. He connected with the audience through a camera, which, as you know, is not the easiest thing in the world. You're just talking to a lump of metal, and somehow he gets across. He had warmth, but he also had gravitas and credibility. He could adapt to any different situation. He had everything you need as a presenter, and great delivery, and a lovely sort of turn of phrase. And he was a really good man, and he was the nicest, and he was the best. And I feel absolutely privileged and proud to have known him, albeit I'm very, very sad at the moment.
Absolutely. Caroline, you're chief exec at Parkinson's UK. How much difference did John Stapleton make through his honesty about his own condition over the last year or so?
Well, probably a lot of people don't know that John had been working with the charity since 2009, so a long time. So his mum had Parkinson's and he was never afraid to come forward and support the charity. So he helped us with many things, from fundraising events to just raising awareness and talking about what it feels like to be the son of someone with Parkinson's.
Even before he was diagnosed?
Even before he was diagnosed, which is fantastic. But then, of course, when he was diagnosed, he did some iconic, and they really are iconic videos with his son, Nick, just talking about things that as humans we find awkward to talk about. But it's really important when you get a diagnosis to talk about some of the things that are a little bit scary, what you want to happen to you. And John was fantastic at doing that, and we're so grateful. And we call it the Stapleton effect, because after John did that, we were inundated with inquiries to our helpline and our website, with people just wanting to know more about the condition, what they could support a loved one with, but also very kindly people donated to the charity. So John really helped us in a huge way, and we're so grateful but equally so sad today.
If John was here now, what would he want you to say about people who are worried about Parkinson's, living with Parkinson's?
So as everybody has said, John was very honest and very authentic, and he would want people just to get on with it. So he would want people to make sure they make the best of living today. So that's about exercising, taking your meds, and most importantly, connecting with other people and having that ability to kind of share and be open. And he would want people to take part in research as well, because John was very interested in our brain bank that we have. So everything that we do at Parkinson's UK to support the community, John was 100% behind. But be positive, John would be saying.
Be positive, yeah. And Nikki, I mean, he was so eloquent, so confident as a communicator. Were you surprised that he was so upfront about his diagnosis and prepared to just talking about the sometimes difficult reality of Parkinson's when he got the condition himself?
Well, no, I think, John, it comes back to the authenticity. It was real, what you saw and what you get, you got. And do you remember he did the chat show, The Time, The Place? So for me, seeing him do that as a young whippersnapper was amazing. And he was so supportive as well. So he was on one side, The Time and The Place. And then on the other side was Robert Kilroy Silk. And you could tell, who was the real deal. And just the last thing I'd say, it was in my career, he was kind and he was brilliant, and it was such a privilege to work with John Stapleton.
And Nick, I know I'm going to generalise horribly here and say that sometimes chaps aren't very good about talking about their health. But I know in recent times, lots of you are getting better, and you yourself have been open about your own health problems. Do you think that John, in his way, has helped other people to speak up?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. Certainly from my experience, I know from talking about things myself, that other people have sort of felt brave enough to go to the doctors or talk about it generally and be open. And it's absolutely the same with John. I'm not surprised at all at the huge reaction when he actually came out and said what he was going through. Not surprised at all. And it is quite a difficult thing to do, I have to say. But once you've broken that barrier, it's not so hard. But at the beginning, coming out and talking publicly to millions of people about what you're going through health-wise, which is such a personal thing, it is very, very difficult. But thank goodness John did. I'm not surprised he did. And the one word that sums him up really for me is a genuine guy, a real gent.
Nikki, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and Caroline from Parkinson's UK, thank you for all your memories today, talking about the Stapleton effect, and we're going to stay with that now, aren't we, really?
We are, because Morning Live follows us in about an hour's time with Louise and Gethin, and they will also be paying their own tribute to John. Guys, I know you've got plans to talk about John and the difference he made.
Absolutely. We've had so many messages, like you already this morning, talking about John, a friend, legendary broadcaster. And as you know, John was a big part of the Morning Live family. And alongside his son, Nick, he openly shared his Parkinson's diagnosis with us, as lots of people call it, as you just said there, John, the Stapleton effect, wasn't it? So today we're going to take a look back at John's incredible career and his lasting legacy.
If you want to send any messages, do please send them in. We've had lots already. Also on the show...
John and Sally, we'll see you tomorrow. Coming up on Morning Live, we are celebrating the life of our friend and legendary presenter, John Stapleton. For over 4 decades, he brought us the stories that mattered, and more recently shared his Parkinson's diagnosis with us right here on Morning Live. Today, we pay tribute to John.
First today, we are talking about the sad news that on Sunday, our friend and legendary broadcaster, John Stapleton, died in hospital.
He was a huge part of the Morning Live family, of course, alongside his son Nick. And back in October 2024, they shared with us that John had been diagnosed with Parkinson's. John talked about adapting to life with the condition, and he was talking about the support available.
So today we celebrate John's life and his incredible legacy.
It's 7 o'clock on Monday the 2nd of May, and this is the BBC's Breakfast Time programme. A very good morning to you. The news headlines.
As a reporter and broadcaster.
More on that post office dispute in just a moment.
And campaigning consumer journalist.
And a watchdog warning, how not to get caught by the cons that are classics of their kind.
John Stapleton was for over 40 years a trusted voice, which went hand in hand with a sense of fun.
I mean, how nasty are you?
About this nasty.
He really is nasty.
Born in Oldham in 1946, John worked as a local newspaper reporter before landing a job on the BBC programme Nationwide, where he reported for 3 years on all manner of subjects.
And what it does is this. As you're driving along the road, it bounces a beam off the car in front, works out the relative distance between the two of you.
Off-screen, John had married fellow journalist Lynn Foldswood. And when a consumer programme called Watchdog needed new hosts, John and Lynn got the call.
Hello and welcome to a new series of Watchdog at a new time.
Yes, Monday evenings is where you'll find us every week from now right through until the summer, investigating horror stories, many of which are all too familiar.
They were TV's original golden couple, and millions watched as together they led campaigns which changed lives.
At least 10 children have died after putting pen tops in their mouths, inhaling them and blocking their windpipes.
After a 3-year campaign, Lynn announced that the design of pen top lids had changed the world over.
Now it's got air vents on the top, and that reduces the risk of death by inhalation.
In later years, John returned to reporting on breakfast television, handling the stories which touched the nation.
52 steel pillars there representing every one of those who died on this day 10 years ago.
Most recently, John became part of the Morning Live family, often joining his son Nick.
Was anyone making you do that voice, Dad, or was that your choice?
He never misses an opportunity, even on live television, to take the mickey out of his dad.
In 2022, he looked at life after the death of a loved one, opening up about how he'd coped after losing wife Lynn 2 years earlier.
She would want me to get on with my own life, a new life, a different life. I'm willing to learn how to cope with this better.
John never shied away from sharing, and in October 2024, he told us about his recent diagnosis with Parkinson's disease.
I'm fairly pragmatic about the prospect of this getting worse. I try to remain positive because what's the point of not being?
And together, John and Nick talked about what the future might look like.
I would be willing to go into care reluctantly. I mean, I'd take your advice on that, obviously, because I would try and cling on for as long as I possibly could. But I'm a realist too, I think. I think you know that.
Yeah, of course. I want it to be your choice, and I want you to know that obviously I'm going to support you in whatever you want to do.
Thank you.
Over 4 decades, John brought us the stories that mattered, told with honesty, integrity, and a twinkle in his eye. John, you'll be missed. Our hearts go out to Nick and all of his family, of course.
Oh, what a lovely man he was. And it was really great to have him as part of this show as well. And he was here recently, wasn't he?
He was actually in the summer, and he was a total joy. He was on talking about 40 years of Watchdog, which of course he was a huge part of, but just watching him, watching everyone else, being in his environment, really, you know, commanding the space, the pattern of language, and really funny. He was telling really funny stories during rehearsals, and you could hear the producers going, "Hey, we need to move on now." And it was like, John's got another story, because he had so many. He was here with his son Nick, who's a massive part of our show as well. And you could see how proud Nick was. Like, his eyes were wide open, just watching John do his thing. It was just lovely to have them both on the show.
What a joy. And Nick left this beautiful tribute for him as well. I'm just going to read some of it because it's really moving. He says, finding the right words for this is really hard. I'm incredibly blessed to have 2 pretty remarkable parents. More than anyone, he loved my mum. Losing her broke him for a long time, though he managed to find his own way and lived a full life without her. He loved his friends, socialising, dinner parties, and mostly wine. He was just a very loving, unbelievably generous man. You won't meet anyone with a bad word to say about him, and you can't do much better than that. He and I spoke pretty much every day. He was genuinely one of my best friends, as well as my dad. What a lovely thing to say, Nick.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
Really gives you a measure of their relationship as well.
Mentioned Nick's mum there, of course, Lynn Foldswood, who John worked with alongside for a long time. And you were saying, when you do a job like that, you're in people's homes. You get to know them so well, hence so many lovely tributes.
Yeah, you're sort of invited, especially the time of day he worked as well, you're invited into people's homes, and I think he really had a huge impact on so many people. And you can see that from all the messages we've had in this morning. I'll just read a couple of them. Kathy said that John was a very special man. Whenever he was on TV, you knew it was worth watching. It was never about himself, but about how he could help others. He'll be missed, and it's clear that Nick has inherited both of his parents' talents, as you said.
That's very true. The comedy timing, for sure, yeah. Hazel says that she grew up watching John on TV. It was always comforting to listen to him. What a gentleman and a lovely soul.
William says he worked with John between 2006 and 2007, and he was such a lovely man.
Sheila and Richard say that John was such a huge part of many people's lives, and that he will be sadly missed by so many.
And thank you so much for all your messages, and we will keep those messages and we'll send them on to Nick as well. We'll read a few more out later in the programme, and you can send us a WhatsApp if you want to on 0800 032 1100. I can say that better probably. You can probably say it better. Or you can scan the QR code on the screen. That's for messages and pictures only. Please do not call that number.
I totally haven't got in your head at all with that number this morning, right? The noughts and zeros.
You're just practising, aren't you, for just a minute?
Oh, my goodness. Still to come.
But we're starting today by discussing Monday's top headlines with Giles Brandreth and Camilla Tominey.
Yeah, and we're going to start by paying tribute to an incredible man. You will have been hearing tributes to him across all of the morning shows this morning and yesterday, opening your newspapers or online. Broadcasting legend, of course. Great colleague and a wonderful friend of mine, John Stapleton, sadly passed away yesterday at the age of 79. He'd been battling with Parkinson's and other conditions as well. Like many in the studios here at ITV Daytime, I had the pleasure of working alongside John for many years, starting at GMTV, where he certainly was an incredible mentor, a fantastic person to go to for advice and guidance, but mostly he just became a brilliant friend. He will be so sadly missed and greatly remembered as a wonderful journalist, generosity of time and consideration. He always had a calmness about being around John, no matter what he was doing in the storm and the chaos of live news, whether he was in a war zone, whether he was fronting some election coverage. While the news was breaking, John was always so calm. It was incredible to be around, and it was just a pleasure to know him.
Absolutely. Giles, you've got the jumper on
I'm wearing my
in
TVAM
tribute.
jumper because that's how I first got to know John 40 years ago. And I think what's interesting about him is that he was a really decent person. That's why we're remembering him with great affection and respect, because you could trust him. He was an honest person. He was totally straightforward. He was with you there and with you there, always the same person. He was fundamentally serious, though, which I think is quite interesting, because in a world like we're in, we do lots of fun things. And what I like about this show, certainly was true, I learned from John, is take the fun things in a fun way, but take the serious things seriously. And he was a real journalist. Getting all that right was important.
Yes, I was going to say that because we forget, because he was very popular on daytime TV and he was very much a kind of household name and somebody that viewers could feel comfortable with. I mean, you mentioned it there, Ben. There are a few journalists that you can really say they're such a safe pair of hands that you can send them to Iraq, but equally you can go and send them to cover somebody's golden wedding anniversary, okay? And that was John. And I think from a viewership point of view, if you saw him, and it was the same for his late wife, Lynn Foldswood, these are serious journalists, they're wanting to raise an awareness of really important issues for the audience, but the key focus the whole time is trying to speak up on behalf of people and tell their stories. And that's why figures like, and John Stapleton, he wasn't, you know, didn't want a big fanfare. It wasn't a massive ego. You know, it wasn't all done with a hysterical flourish. That was the point of the man. If he covered the news, you'd listen and know that what he was saying was to be trusted, and that's so important.
It wasn't about him, it was about the story and about the viewer, which was interesting.
There's some magic as well that lots of people have contacted me since yesterday with the chemistry between him and Penny Smith.
Yes.
Who did the news hour for such a long time. That's when I first got to work with both of them. And the two of them together were such a wonderful balance of Penny's sort of madness and joy and enthusiasm and energy, and John's calm exterior. And she'd have all this boundless energy, and every now and again he'd just raise an eyebrow. And I was talking to Penny about this yesterday. And they were it was such magic watching the two of them together, and they were still great friends. And they remained great friends for many years. And we were lucky enough, we had a group of us from GMTV used to get together and try and meet up and sort of reminisce. And just a few weeks ago, there was 4 or 5 of us got together. Ranveer was there. And we've got John, you could see, and Kiffy and Owen. And we'd worked together. So I started working there since 2000. Ranveer came in a little bit later on. But John was the consistent presence in all of that. And we had lunch together. And there was nothing he loved more than being around everybody, telling stories, having a laugh, and having a glass of wine as well. You know, he was a man that could drink and enjoyed that part of just that being connection. And there's something else that I wanted to share, because as soon as I heard, I contacted the guys here and said, there's some amazing footage of all of us at GMTV dressed as the Osmonds. They misheard and were trying to find us dressed as the Osborns. So that caused confusion.
Dysfunctional.
But the point you make, John was so brilliant. He took the job seriously, but he didn't take himself seriously. And we all dressed up on Fiona's last day, because she was a massive Donny Osmond fan, and the rest of us dressed up as the Osmonds as a tribute to her. This is us as the Osmonds. You've got Kate, you've got Richard Arnold, Andrew Castle, you've got me, you've got Penny, and you've got John. Just enjoy this little moment of us all. This was a tribute to Fiona. And there is such magic in that.
Yes.
And Darren, who's here with us on camera 4, has known John for many years as well, was sharing so many stories. I think he shot that as well. And there's so many people that have amazing memories and stories about working with John and having an experience of being around John and have learnt so much from John. it was such a privilege to know who he
It's on telly
was.
for such a long time.
Yeah.
And it's all very well viewing it from the actual telly and what you're seeing, but people don't understand what goes on behind. And for others coming into the industry like you know, not necessarily au fait with that journalistic medium, to ask people who are veterans for advice and actually get good advice, goodness me, that's valuable.
Absolutely. And what his son wrote yesterday as well.
Yeah, Nick.
It
also
was,
a journalist.
Yes,
following his
absolutely.
dad's
Absolutely beautiful. We've got some comments actually from the viewers too. Catherine says, a wonderful, wonderful man. Him and his wife did so much for so many people. Sad to hear this. My thoughts with his family and friends. Helen says, how very sad. He was a true gentleman and a joy to watch on the television. Marion says, I grew up with John on TV. He was always a kind gentleman. His family should be very proud of his legacy. And
This one from Alice.
yeah.
This is
That was what I was just
Alice just popped. She would have worked with John, and this is what Alice has said in speech marks. Shall we have another one? Would so love another cheeky glass of wine with you, John. Proud to call you a colleague, a friend, and honoured to have learnt from him. And we did all learn. So, to your point, Camilla, I came into GMTV with relatively little experience from the world of journalism, and I was surrounded by brilliant journalists, and John was just typified all of those things. And the time and the patience he had with anybody that wanted to ask him questions. So many people have put testimony down of him contacting them saying, I saw your report, I thought it was fantastic, and then engage in a conversation with them. And then more later in life, I was saying to Kat beforehand, we lived in a similar sort of area, and John was such an invaluable source of advice for schooling for Sam and Jack. They followed Nick to the same schools off the back of John's advice of what Nick had done and what they'd experienced, he and Lynn had decided to do. And as you rightly put, you trust somebody with advice for what you're going to do with your kids implicitly. I can't hold John in higher esteem.
Yeah, they're the most precious thing in your life. So the fact that you went to him for that advice goes to show what you think.
Yeah, and I think Nick, massive Manchester City fan, huge Manchester fan. I used to often bump into him at West Ham, and I'd see him, he'd be at the pub round the corners, keeping a low profile because he's obviously City fan in the East End of London. And Manchester City actually tweeted about him yesterday. Saddened to learn that John Stapleton has passed away at the age of 79. He was a passionate City supporter, regular at the stadium. He will be missed. And I think Nick had said that will have absolutely made him up. The fact that City, his club, that he cut him in half and he was sky blue because he loved them so much that they took the time to remember him as well. It's a wonderful tribute.
Yeah.
He will be so, so sadly missed and so fondly remembered. So we're thinking about Nick and Lise, his wife, and all of the family as well. Lise's up there with Lynn laughing down at us now. Should we get a few more...